Hello folks, where we last left off, Project Revert decided to present us with a massive surprise. And I don't know why I act surprised, because this thing has been nothing but surprises since the day it pulled in. However, this one was huge. So, since then, the owner and I have had a chance to talk. When all of this unfolded, the poor guy, he was out of town celebrating a huge success in his family. His son is playing proper hockey, like professional hockey, and he got drafted to a team. So they were out of town celebrating that and getting to know the team that he's going to and the coaches and all that stuff. And this whole thing, when I pulled the drain plug on it, was the night that they were driving back to town here locally to me. And it just so happened he was actually getting a speeding ticket at the time that I sent him this information. Talk about terrible timing. But I had to let him know. So anyway, he and I have chatted since, and I presented him with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we've ultimately come up with a plan that we think we're going to point this thing somewhat at a target and move forward with. So at first blush, a lot of you are probably going to say, why the hell is this motor going back together? And allow me to explain. I'm going to tell you how the conversation's gone between the owner and I. And then at the tail end of that, I will explain to you what's gone on since I last left off with the lower intake manifold change. So when we first spoke, I said, for what it's worth, this engine is toasted. I don't know to what extent, but it's toast. The oil that came out of it is full of junk. And I'll show you here, I kept a little sample of it. Like, not good at all. And this oil, granted it's the motor's first oil change since rebuild, but it has about 25-ish miles on it or so. Not many at all. And granted, after a rebuild, you know, your oil's not going to come out crystal clear, but it also shouldn't come out looking like putty. So I said, you know, yeah, the motor's done. And he's like, this is unbelievable. So, and why it's so unbelievable, it's like an episode out of the Twilight Zone. After this car was painted, the motor went to get installed in it. And the motor, this motor, was purchased secondhand. And from the seller, it was in good condition. That's what they claimed. So when the previous shop went to put this motor in it, they said, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but the motor's toast. We got to rebuild it. He's like, oh my God, here we go, right? Okay, do what you got to do, rebuild it. Then it gets all put together in the half-assed manner that it was and moves on. That's when the 25 miles took place. And then it came to me. So I go to change the oil in this thing, and because we got a little bit of coolant down into the valley, ultimately down in the oil pan, and that's when I find the oil barely will drain out of the pan because there's so much junk coming out. And so I let him know that, and he's like, dude, like, not only was this thing freshly rebuilt, it's like Twilight Zone situation in that the last shop that I had it at did the exact same thing. They're like, hey man, motor's toast, we got to rebuild it. And now you're telling me the same thing. I'm like, well, I'll show you if you want to see it, you know. And like, and he wasn't calling me out or whatever. I mean, he was just venting, right? So yeah, not good. And I mean, again, like it's such an awkward situation to be put in because you've got brand new gaskets, you've got like all my time, you got all this stuff thrown at this car already. And it's like, what do you do? And how bad is it? And now the fact that this motor's toasted, it's kind of like a cancer diagnosis, right? When the doctor says, or when you ask the doctor, how long do you got to live? I don't know, days, weeks, months, year, who knows, right? This thing could go and run for 50,000 miles or more. Like, but the inevitable point that I guess I'm trying to make here is like when oil comes out looking like it did, you're on your last legs, like you're on completely borrowed time. So yeah. Anyway, because we're at like the 11.5 hour on this poor car build, he's like, you know what? The bottom end of this motor is nothing special. It's somewhere between a 302 or a 306. Like I said, we do not know what the bottom end consists of. He's like, you know, I think for what it's worth, we just send it and hope for the best. So here we are. I'm going to, once it's ready to be run again, flush this thing out. I'm going to put a mechanical oil pressure gauge on it and monitor what's going on. I mean, I'm hoping that we've got decent oil pressure. If we don't, well then I guess all of this was for nothing. But yeah, we're kind of in this like send it stage. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that go, you're crazy. And I get it. Like, it is a crazy decision to make, but like, you know, put yourself in this guy's shoes. I mean, he's this far in, like, what do you do? Right? So at this point, we're kind of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. So that's why the motor's going back together. Now, anyway, to fill you in on what's taken place since we last left off here with the lower intake install, new wires, new plugs. I think I mentioned to you guys at some point before, like the plugs in this thing, they were the wrong plugs first and foremost. They weren't gapped correctly. Look at these spark plugs. Not only are they carboned up, they are the wrong spark plugs. And not only are those two things wrong, if you gap these, pardon me while I do that so I can show you. These spark plugs, I mean, they might have just come out of the box like this too, but they're currently gapped at 30 thou. And they were carboned up like crazy. So we got a fresh set of plugs in there. Obviously put the upper plenum on this thing. And actually that caused me quite a bit of grief. My plan was, for those of you with a tight eye that recognize these Ford Racing valve covers, my plan was to run those trick flow valve covers. However, they presented so many clearance issues. It was just like outrageous. There was no way that I could make them work at all. So these Ford Racing valve covers are slightly less taller than the trick flow valve covers. And so they went back on. And I've had these valve covers off and on. I've tried everything to try to make it work. And anyway, the Ford Racing ones are the ones that I had sitting here. So that's what we've gone forward with. Cold air intake, ran it through my blast cabinet, and I slapped a coat of Goodson's aluminum paint on it. I hate that chrome look that these BBK cold air intakes come with. But I also, this thing's more of like a painted theme, the engine and everything that's going on under the hood here. So that whole chrome situation was just too much. That spacer even drives me a little crazy, the EGR spacer, but whatever. We do have a few bits and pieces of shininess on here. We'll put up with that. What else? I mean, obviously all the throttle cables and everything have gone back on. We got our new, that's an SVE, fuel pressure regulator. New gauge so we can set the fuel pressure and everything. And a little bit of air conditioning stuff. And the reason I threw that stuff on there is because it's a little easier to work with, like putting that stuff on prior to the cold air intake and everything going on. So I've just kind of mounted, and not like, obviously the compressor is not in there yet. So that stuff's all to come, and I'll take you guys along for the ride on that. But this is kind of where we're at as far as Project Revert. Man, this thing has been a roller coaster ride. I can't even begin to tell you guys. Well, you sort of lived it with me for the most part, other than the conversations between me and the owner. But yeah, it's wild. I hope that the explanation as to how we've decided, or the owners decided to move forward with this, makes sense. I get it. It's not what should be done from a technical standpoint, but man, the poor guy is just in such a bad spot with this thing. It's just devastating, you know? And it's sad that anyone's got to go through any of this stuff, but like I say, we're going to cross our fingers and hope for the best. And hopefully this provides some content for folks that are out there that may be in this same situation. I know there's always horror stories about people getting treated terribly by shops and stuff. So I don't know. Hopefully this helps you guys out and shed some light on things. But it's going to produce us some content surrounding, you know, like flushing a motor out and hoping for the best and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's all to come. But for now, let's get after putting some AC stuff on this car. Okay, now you might have seen me working with a Q-tip here, and I thought I'd just stop and explain a little trick that I've learned over the years. So I'm dealing with cleaned up on a wire wheel and then painted bolt heads. And obviously when you tighten them, well, I don't know, maybe my tools are just a little old and worn out, but you tend to at least scar up the paint a little bit. So the trick that I work with is nothing more than a Q-tip and whatever rattle can you use to paint your bolt heads. So just get that Q-tip head nice and wet and then go in on your bolt head and just kind of work your way around nice and easy. Make sure you don't get it anywhere else. And then once your bolts are nice and tight, you can kind of give them that final tidy. Now, there are better ways to do this. I actually have some stuff over here that if you're dealing with bare bolts, I've got a video on this. This stuff will turn bolts black, okay? Black oxide concentrate, that and some distilled water. In this case, these bolts were treated and, you know, just whatever. Didn't want to go to the black oxide side very easily, so I'm dealing with paint here. Anyway, just a quick little workaround for you if you're dealing with painted bolt heads. This is a nice way to tidy them up after they're tight, and if you scarred them up a little bit, that's how you do it. I just wanted to stop here real quick and mention a couple of things. And I should also mention as well, I am no expert when it comes to air conditioning, okay? I know enough to be dangerous with, so I don't want to be giving out too many pieces of advice here because chances are my advice might be wrong. But at any rate, I do what I can with what I've got. So I'm just essentially following instructions, okay? I'm torquing things to spec. The biggest thing with air conditioning systems, at least these old school ones, I can somewhat speak to the Foxbody ones, is your seals and having this whole system be a closed, tight system is quite literally what makes these things work. 9 times out of 10, when an air conditioning system stops working, it's because one of the seals has gone somewhere and you've sprung a leak, and therefore your pressure switch kicks the whole system off. It won't allow your compressor to kick on just because you'll run your compressor dry. And just for reference here, that pressure switch is here, okay, on the accumulator. So again, the seals are everything. And now these seals kind of present themselves in varying forms. I should have maybe laid this out for you a little bit better on the top of the compressor, but there's 4 rubber seals underneath these fittings. Well, here, I'll show you a brand new kit of seals that I have here. So that's what they look like right there, okay? And then this is like just a universal AC system seal kit, okay? So you've got your springs, and I'll show you those in a second. You got a whole wide array of varying seals. You can pick these up for like dirt cheap. Go through your whole AC system, replace every one of the seals, and that looks a little intimidating, okay? You don't use all of those seals in one car's AC system, at least not in these Fox bodies. But go through and replace every one of the seals. You know, just pull them off, match them up with the one you need, put it on, and I'll show you some of those right here. So right here, okay? 2 seals on each line, little green rubber seals. And then inside this housing is a spring clip. I'm gonna try my best to use a pick and get it out for you. But essentially all you do, you don't worry too much about the ones that are coming off, right? Because they're junk. But work these off. Okay, so there's one there. You can just match it up with one of the ones in your kit. Or in this case, my lines actually come with them. So I'll show you here. And this actually is pretty slick if you're replacing your lines too. There's no guesswork, right? They just have the seals and the spring clip right on there. So that spring clip, again, is in this housing. I'll be absolutely floored if I can get this with one hand. It's one of those things that you kind of gotta hold your tongue just right in order to get these guys out. Oh, come on, make me a liar. Chances are I'm gonna have to get in here with another little pick to get this guy out of there. If I could get under that corner, I'd have him out right now. But anyway, pull the old spring clips out and put your new ones on. And then as far as, oh man, look how close I am, son of a gun. Anyway, as far as putting these lines on, you can't screw this up, right? One's bigger than the other. So this guy's going on your top line, that one's going on your bottom line. You just push them in until they click, pull them back out to make sure that you got a good seal, and you're good to go. These things, like getting these to release, it's much like your fuel lines, right? There's a little kind of plastic jobby that you stick in there. It goes around, kind of releases the clip, and boom, your fuel line comes out. Same thing goes for these AC lines, okay? Very inexpensive kit at your local parts store. Just tell them what you're looking for, like a AC clip release kit or whatever the hell they're called. And pick yourself one up. Oh, there we go. One hit the floor. But anyway, pull those out, replace your rubbers and your springs, and you can stab your line in there. All right, folks. And finally, I need to add some lubrication to this system. And again, I need to mention, look, I'm not an expert on this, so please do not take it as gospel. This is just what I've always done. And for all I know, maybe I've just lucked out in what I've done. But nonetheless, here we go. I have here some PEG 46, and this is a lubricant you can buy at your local parts store. It comes in, it's actually quite confusing when you go to buy it because it comes in all different kinds of numbers. And from what I understand, the number references the lubricity, like low, medium, high, so on and so forth. You can buy it with dye in it, so you can find leaks under ultraviolet light. It goes on and on. At any rate, I'm using PEG 46. Now, this compressor came with this pink sticker on it, all right? And this pink sticker references some information in the book, which tells us if you got a pink label, it comes pre-charged with 3 ounces of PEG oil. Now, that pink sticker also has a QR code on it that takes you to a page online that shows you like most makes, models, and years, and it tells you how much to put in the system for your particular application. Now, what's interesting is when you go to like 90 to 93 in this QR code, it says to add mineral oil. But if you're adding mineral oil, it says to use R12, which we're not using R12. We're going to be using R134, and therefore I'm substituting the mineral oil for the PEG oil, because from what I understand, you don't mix those two up. PEG oil goes with R134 and mineral oil goes with R12, I think. Again, please don't take this as gospel. Anyway, we're going to be taking, as per the instructions, I need to add 8 ounces, but because this thing's already got 3 in it, we're only going to put 5. Got the old trusty turkey baster here, so we're going to be adding the oil to the system with that. And that pretty much buttons up this air conditioning system. Well, folks, a lot in this episode. Now, I don't think that any of it is very good advice, if I'm being completely honest with you. If this were my car, I do not think I'd be going down the road that we currently are, okay? I would be pulling that motor. And for any of you that have caught my Kenny Bell, which is still sitting there collecting dust, I know, we'll get it on as soon as this car's done. But my Kenny Bell, right, what started out as a pulled thread ended up being a full rebuild, of which didn't have any idea what I was doing rebuilding that thing, nor did my buddy that gave me a hand, but we figured it out. But that's a pretty good example of how I operate, right? Like even something as goofy as that, where we didn't need to rebuild it, all we needed to do is repair the threads in the compressor housing, we ended up rebuilding it. So hopefully that kind of lets you know where I sit here, all right? Like, I don't think this is the best idea, although it is an idea worth trying. Let's be honest, it's probably just going to be short-lived, if even that, right? Because we're going to put a mechanical oil pressure gauge on it, see if we've even got any. And all of this could have been for nothing. I don't know, but we're taking a shot. We're going to see how it goes. At any rate, from an entertainment perspective, I hope everyone enjoyed this. Maybe don't share it with anyone. Because, yeah, this is a lot of crazy stuff going on with this thing right now. And I don't know. We're going through uncharted territory, like feeling your way through a dark hallway, right? Not sure where you're going to end up. Anyway, I'll leave this one here. So next videos, you know what? I think we're probably going to fire this thing before I tear into the interior. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, stand by. There's going to be some interior stuff coming up, stereo related stuff. We got the 417 Fox heater control stereo relocate. That's going to go in. Got to mount those Recaros. And yeah, we got to fire this thing and see what's going to happen. So stay tuned for all that. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, folks. I really appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.